So then let's jump into the new law that was added this year. So here's the Senate bill. It is now a public act. And what it does was it amended that Illinois Human Rights Act that we just talked about. And this was really important given what's going on across the country today with the influx of migrants and the whole crisis and everything that we're having here. So what this public act decided to do was to protect immigrants from discrimination in any housing related transactions. So that means us rentals by making immigration a protected class. So basically now Illinois here add immigration right at the bottom of this list as a protected class. It already went into effect January 1st. So if you guys are screening, have rental properties that you listed for rent, you're screening, you have to have immigration status there as a protected class. There are a couple of exceptions. It applies to all of the rentals in Illinois except for the small ones. So 1 to 4 unit apartment buildings that are owner occupied. So you have to live there. Or if you are renting out a private room and you live there, or one of your family members live there. And surprisingly, none of the federal properties like the HUD properties it applies to. But everybody else, we do have to consider immigration as a protected class. Now let's take a look at a little bit of the details about what they mean by adding immigration as a protected class. And I think they were really smart. And one of the things they did was to define what they mean by immigration. So in the Illinois Human Rights Act, what they mean by immigration is a person's citizenship or immigration status. And I think this is really critical and important. They say the actual status or the perceived status. So in other words, somebody is a US citizen or Canadian citizen or Middle Eastern citizen in actuality, or whether you think they are. And I think this is really critical because we know that a lot of people have preconceived notions when they look at somebody based on the way that they look. They say, oh, this person's not a citizen. So this Human Rights Act covers for immigration not only what landlords know what their actual status is, what they think this person's citizenship or immigration status is. So it's really important that we keep that in mind. Okay. So what can we not do against immigrants? And now I'm going to go over the list of prohibited activities. In other words, you shouldn't be doing this for any of the protected classes, not just for immigrants, but for any of the protected classes. But I gave you some examples here in terms of what we should be doing for the rental properties. And just keep in mind, immigrants, okay? So we as landlords should not be refusing to, interact with them in a real estate transaction. So when we list our property for rent, an applicant will call us and say, hey, do you have your property for rent? And based on the last name, to us, it sounds like a foreign last name. Nope. They could be an immigrant. I'm not going to even respond to their inquiry. You can't do that. The other thing we can't do is to change the terms of a real estate transaction. So we set up a viewing, they come to our, viewing, you look at them like, oh gosh, I think this person is an immigrant. So because of that, now you want them to have a higher credit score or more of a security deposit or charge a higher rent or, just any of the terms there. Can't do that. The other thing we can't do is refuse to receive or not forward a real estate offer. This applies more to brokers because you guys are getting the contracts for sale, selling and buying, and you forward them. But I guess it also could be for rentals. So let's say, you're not accepting, once they fill out the application, you're not accepting it. Or maybe you are serving as a leasing agent or in whatever capacity you're collecting documents, applications for somebody, and then you're not giving it to the owner because you're like, oh, the owner told me they don't want immigrants. I'm not going to give it to them. You can't do that. You can't refuse to pass along any information about that. The other thing you can't do is refuse to negotiate in a real estate transaction. Again, this is a little bit more for buying and selling, but it does apply to rentals because, again, let's say you're not responding to rental inquiries or you're not showing a property based on you think that this person is an immigrant. The other thing you can't do is tell the person, hey, nope, property's not for rent. So somebody calls you, contacts you and says, hey, is this property for rent? And for you think that they're an immigrant, you can't say, nope, property's not for rent when it in actuality. Let's see. Sandra says, what if the tenant says, I don't have a social security number or an ITIN number? Excellent question, Sandra. Hold on to that. I got a slide or two in a little bit that will absolutely cover that because it is going to create a problem for us now. Okay, how am I going to screen these people? Okay, so hold on to that question. A couple more here. Is the other thing we can't do is to not tell applicants about our other properties. You know, they contact us about property A, we think they're an immigrant. So because of that, we're going to tell them, no, that property's not available. And yeah, I don't have anything else. Or no, you don't want to see that one. That's in a rich area. You're not going to afford it or whatever reason. You can't blackball them from any of your properties. The other thing you can't do is to refuse to allow them to come see the property. You also, and this one I think is the one that we're going to have to take some action on maybe right now, is you can't either discriminate in anything related to you publicizing the property. So be careful when you are listing your properties for rent. You can't say no immigrants allowed. If you have any flyers or any way that you are advertising it, again, you can't say no immigrants. And then check your applications. You guys shouldn't have been doing this, and hopefully you haven't, but make sure you're taking a look at your applications now. Don't have a question in there asking if the applicant is an immigrant. So just do not use the word immigration in any way, shape, or form in anything having to do with your rentals. Okay. All righty. How do you, I think you might be able to help me with this one a little bit. They didn't really say what the penalties were going to be. All they said was it was going to be a civil rights violation and a fair housing violation. And they didn't say exactly what the penalties were, but I think you said in the past that these can be pretty big penalties for these types of violations, right?
Yeah, because it's part of the Illinois Human Rights Act. So that Human Rights Act penalties apply here too.
All right. Yep. So this is not one we want to sneeze at right there. This is a major violation if you get caught.
Yeah, more and more we have in our office more and more of immigrant.
Yep.
There's no correct word to say it is, but have you heard all the news that people are being bused here to Chicago?
Yep.
Okay, so it's creating a need for housing, employment. They're not illegal because they were admitted to United States under a court date, so they have a court date later on.
Right.
Point. So they're not fully illegal, they're not legal, but then they need housing, employment, medical care, everything else. So
yep. There's a huge need now, and a lot of landlords are not super happy with this protected class, but you raised a good point, is that they are at this point sort of, I mean, they are legal, but they're sort of in limbo. So it's important for us to not discriminate against those individuals because they got to live somewhere.
Well, I'm going to put my 2 cents and see if anybody is not going to agree with me. As long as the person pays your rent, protect your property, and be nice to the neighborhood, does it matter what kind of a status of immigration that person has?
Exactly. It doesn't matter for race, whether they're in their wheelchair, whether, how old they are, whether they're married, none of that stuff matters. So immigration shouldn't, although we have a little bit of a concern in, how they're going to make their monies, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's completely separate issue. The person still needs to qualify for, what do you call it? Qualify income-wise, credit-wise, reference-wise. The person still needs to qualify for the rental. Nobody's taking that right away from the landlord. What he's telling you is that don't have a sign up and reject them or refuse application to them because they look foreignery. Is that a word?
Foreign.
Foreign, yeah. Yeah, so don't ask for proof of citizenship from everybody before you show them the apartment.